Breaking tonight, Fox News exclusively getting our hands on a letter from the man who went on a murderous rampage at Fort Hood. And it is raising new questions about the Obama administration and the shooting spree still described today as a case of workplace violence. The chilling letter sent to Pope Francis in Nidal Hassan's own hand, and it issues warnings to religious leaders and much more. Catherine Herridge got the letter. She is home this evening. This broke late. She reported it, though, from home. And Trace Gallagher reports from our West Coast newsroom with more. Trace?
And Megan, Fox News has confirmed that Nidal Hassan directed his attorney to mail an undated 6-page handwritten letter to the Pope titled, quote, "A warning to Pope Francis, members of the Vatican, and other religious leaders around the world." In it, Hassan appears to make multiple references to the Quran, including a list of guidelines for believers. In one section titled Jihad, Hassan praises the willingness to fight for Almighty Allah, describing it as a test that elevates the mujahideen, or holy fighters, and that the fighters have a greater rank in the eyes of Allah than believers who don't fight. There is no reference to the Fort Hood massacre where Hassan killed 13 and wounded 31. The Defense Department continues to call that massacre workplace violence, despite the fact that Hassan has repeatedly referred to himself as a soldier of Allah. And his lawyer says the letter to the Pope, quoting here, underscores how much of his life actions and mental thought process are driven by religious zeal. And it also reinforces my belief that the military judge committed reversible error by prohibiting Major Hassan from both testifying and arguing how his religious beliefs motivated his actions during the shooting. And remember, back in August, Fox News obtained another Hassan letter in which he pledged his allegiance to the Islamic State and its leader, Abu Bakr. We have seen no response yet from the Vatican concerning the latest letter. Megan.
Unbelievable. Trace, thank you. Joining me now for more on this, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and a man who actually testified on the Fort Hood shooting and the extent of radicalization in the American Muslim community back in 2011. Zuhdi, good to see you tonight. And so the letter, leaves no doubt about what this man is about and his belief in jihad. And let's just put it on the board for the viewers so they can see it in the man's own hand. I'll show it to you, actually, because let me just show you this. Can you see this? Can you see this, Luke? Okay, so this is the actual, I don't know if you can see the handwriting on there, if that's easy, but I'll read to you on the board what it says. He talks about jihad and the willingness to fight for Almighty Allah. It's called a warning to Pope Francis, members of the Vatican, and other religious leaders around the world. And he goes on to talk about how believing fighters, the mujahideen, have a greater rank in the eyes of Allah than believers who don't fight. How does any government still treat this as workplace violence?
Megan, that's why I testified, is that you can't defeat an ideology that you can't even discuss. The report on Fort Hood was 84 pages and never mentioned Islam, jihad, Salafism, and the ideology we're fighting. And yet, his spiritual sanctioner, Imam Awlaki, was a legitimate target in an operation because of the threat he posed. There were copycats after Nidal, Nasser Abdo, who was arrested for terrorism charges, that wanted to commit another Fort Hood. How many recurrences, hundreds that we've seen, of this virus of jihadism that keeps replicating? And because of the fear, because of the cowardice of our administration, American Muslim groups that are lobbyists for the OIC that want to put an apologetic cover over the Cold War of the 21st century, which is political Islam and its antagonism and its fight against the West, against liberty.
I like the way you put that, political Islam, because there's Islam, and very few people are suggesting that Islam itself is a dangerous religion. It's the political Islam, it's radical Islam, it's those who pervert it into something other than what it was meant to be.
Exactly, and if you want to allow reform to happen, I love my faith, and if I want to have a seat at the table for reformers, actually I think it's more bigoted to say there's no problem and let the dominants, the Islamists, the OIC countries dominate who speaks for us rather than let us have a voice for liberty.
Who are the ones pressuring the administration to not call it what it is?
Those who believe in jihad, the jihadists, the Muslim Brotherhood apologists that may disagree with Al-Qaeda and ISIS about the means rather, but the ends of the Islamic State, a form of an Islamic State they think can be a democracy, when in fact many of us whose families escaped theocracy to come here don't want that
This
jihad.
has a real effect. I mean, not only are we calling Fort Hood workplace violence, of course we're calling the Oklahoma beheading workplace violence. Now, the DA down there said that that case in which a woman was beheaded may have more to do with race than religion, but did not rule out religion. And of course, we know the man's Facebook page was replete with beheadings and Osama bin Laden propaganda. Not only that, but the president in his UN speech recently praised an imam who not long ago made some very controversial statements about jihad. The question is whether this blindness is really coming back to haunt us, to hurt us.
Absolutely. It's just like if you want to treat drunk driving and you don't treat the alcoholism, you're never going to fix the problem. It's going to get worse because you're enabling the pathologies to continue. And they are enabling the jihadists to control the voices in our community when we actually need to get some fire under the feet of Muslims to say, you know what, your house has a problem, fix it.
But how do we get politically pressured by jihadists? It's got to be a more moderate faction that's putting the pressure on.
There's two sides to this coin. On the other side of the jihadist coin are the Islamic governments, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamists in Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabis, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. They are Islamists that we don't want to offend because we have alliances against terrorism.
By calling Fort Hood jihad instead of workplace violence?
This is, we're also not empowered to take on a theopolitical ideology. We don't want to engage in this religious discourse. So what happens is that negligence creates an inability to have a strategy, and we need to engage Muslims in that reform. And we don't want to say the R word, reform. And
maybe some danger as well. Zuhdi, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
And our thanks to Catherine Herridge for that breaking news report.